Alrighty, folks, we are ideally speaking with Mr. Stephen Dow, who is currently working on tech issues to log in. Here he is. Just see, that's Murphy's Law. As soon as I hit record, he joins. Here we go. Stephen, can you hear me? There he is. Stephen.
Unmuted. Okay.
All right. See, technology works. We are recording
Technology.
now, just so you know. So we're just getting started. I will continue to let people in. Again, Stephen, do me a favor, do that marketing spiel so you and I don't get in trouble for this.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, although I work very happily for Velocity Mortgage Capital, all the ideas and topics discussed on this channel, that of my own. So let's get it going.
So, Stephen, what I wanted to do in this video, like we talked about on Thursday, is really break down why I think the 90% CLTV loan will eventually become the tool of choice for investors. It may not lead to closed deals, but it will lead to lots of conversations. I believe investors today should get very comfortable writing at least two offers, right? Maybe there's a cash or conventional model, and then there is the 90% CLTV loan where you facilitate likely a higher price, but you get some seller carryback and low down. So why don't we treat this as a one-on-one call? Again, folks, this is for you, so please put questions in the comments. Please raise your hand. Stephen and I talk about this all the time, and we miss things because we're so in it. So ask any and all questions. But Stephen, talk about the power of 90% CLTV in a world of most investor loans, 75 or even 70 today. So talk about that.
Well, again, the opportunity to kind of close on deals that may not be able to happen just due to the current rate environment, available loan programs, the scenario itself, just because, if it doesn't cash flow based upon current financing, options, it's makes it very difficult to, kind of pick up an investment property. So with the opportunity to kind of shift around the leverage position, and so more of it is ideally on the seller side, it'll just allow you to just lower the overall monthly, mortgage payment. So that's what we talk about with the blended rate. So obviously at 70 or 75% LTV, right now in the current market, rates may be at a certain level where it doesn't cash flow. Well, if you could then shift it around on what we talk about all the time on the 50, 40, 10 to where we do a 50% LTV first, where the rates, actually pretty not too shabby, but the combination of the seller second at a much lower rate, typically even below conventional rates, it allows for you to blend the two to just have an overall lower payment, but at a higher leverage of 90%. So the key here is just to understand the math part, because people obviously just remember and are trained to just 70, 75%, whatever the rate is, here's what I got, and here's my only option. But nowadays, with listings being on the market for a lot longer, you're seeing a lot more quote unquote motivated sellers, price drops, things of that nature. If they have enough equity, you can approach them with a more feasible option, I think, instead of giving them a low ball offer, like giving them a price maybe, but you need your terms. You know what I mean? Right. So if you could just crunch the numbers to see if the overall monthly payments of the two mortgages, one to me, one to the seller, and compare that with the monthly rents, it's just kind of just a simple set of math problems.
Yeah, the thing I like about the 50, 40, 10, what we created, or the 90% CLTV, which is the backbone of this, is it really does become a win-win situation because you can give the seller their price, but you get your terms, right? You're buying this property for cash flow. It does take a relationship, right? Because you are asking the seller to take back a second. So there has to be a relationship. They have to trust you, all of those things.
Right.
You should get comfortable about talking about installment loan, tax savings, depreciation recapture, maintain income, secured position. So it's certainly a more in-depth conversation. It's I can't imagine a one-call close ever. It's probably more like 5 to 7.
Unless you're on the phone for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's more in detail than that. And I like the fact that you brought up, you got to make sure the opportunity has meat on the bone. What I can say by that is equity, right? You're not going to go to somebody who's got a 95%, FHA loan. It just won't work.
Right.
So you've got to know a little bit more about this.
Agreed. Great segue. I was just going to say, because I've had several conversations to where, we come up with the idea, or they understand now the framework, but now it's like, what kind of information would be useful to kind of allow them to make the pitch, right? So PopStream came up a lot. So that's something that I think you might want to talk upon again, unless you found another platform that gives, borrowers or potential buyers or investors, somewhat of the backstory to the property. So then you could make a, reasonable offer. Otherwise, you're kind of shooting darts, in the dark. So hopefully you're hitting something. You know what I mean? So I think with PopStream, it gives you the opportunity to kind of get some information on the loan itself, if there is one, how long they've had the property. It gives you an idea to where, like, if you don't see, because a lot of times there's the chain of title provide information as well, so that you could see how long they've had the loan for, how much it was. So you can almost guesstimate like how much, of equity they might have to play with to then make a feasible, offer. But I think that, along with understanding what buttons to push, and again, bringing up all those, benefits to the seller, so that it's, structured on a win-win basis.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up, because I was talking with the CEO of Property Radar yesterday or the day before, and they're going to come on. They're going to come on this session next Sunday. So they're going to get a whole deep dive understanding how to take my concept.
I swear, folks, I'm not paid. I wasn't paid for that.
Yeah, you didn't know. No. But yeah, we're going to take my concept of a buy box, which everybody here will know, throw it into Property Radar, and show how you can dig into data. You can do mailers right from there. Because again, a lot of people in my community, they have full-time jobs. But if you can set up a drip campaign to the 5, 6, 7 leads that are off market. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's nice.
Yeah. So we have our first question. There was a hand up, but I saw it disappeared, and I don't recall who that was. So I'll take a question from the comments. This one's from JC. Is there any way that the seller can contribute to the 10% down?
Well, yes and no. Not directly to the down payment. The 10% has to come from the buyer's side as far as the actual amount for the down payment, but the seller can contribute towards the buyer's non-recurring closing costs, right? The points charged to the loan, other, one-time fees for title, escrow, stuff like that. But yeah, normally up to 3% towards non-recurring closing costs. We've made exceptions to that rule sometimes on a case-by-case basis. I've seen up to maybe 5%, but typically speaking, guidelines is 3% towards non-recurring closing costs. So we want a little bit of skin in the game, so to speak, from the potential buyer. That's all.
Well, let's twist this question to even more. Let's say mom and dad want to contribute 10% to this. Could they, quote unquote, gift the funds?
Yes. The beauty of our product is the ease of use. The fact that we only require down payment to be sourced and not seasoned. Seasoned meaning it would have to normally be deposited in your account and have it sit there, usually 2-3 months. We just need it sourced. So somebody, mom and dad, gives you funds. The next day, once it's cleared, literally go down to the bank and get a bank printout on their letterhead, the balance of that date, as of that date, and then maybe a way to reference that that's your account, like account number, and then get the contact information for the for the person verifying the information at the bank, and then from that point, you would wire directly from that account into the closing agent or escrow office or officer's account. They would receive a wire invoice. That's all we would need as far as for proof of down payment. So it makes it for a lot easier for a paper trail. I don't know if some of your listeners have gone through the buying process. When referring to gift funds, you got to get a gift letter from the gifter. You got to get sourcing the gift funds from the gifter. So you got to get bank statements from the gifter as well. So it makes it a little bit kind of cumbersome, at least in my eyes. This way, it's just paper trail is so much simpler and faster. So anyway, that's just my opinion.
So let's put a little more meat on the bone, right? We talk about this 50, 40, 10, and the reason the 50 is there is because that allows you, aka Velocity, to give the best rate, right? It's a very secure position. So today, are those high sevens?
High sevens, 7.865, 30-year fixed, 30-year amortized with 750 or above FICO score. This is based on a no ratio loan. So other than your FICO score coming in at 750 and above and the appraised value to come in to support your desired terms, maybe if I put a spoon up to your nose and you fog it up, I'll lend to you.
Yeah, Velocity Mortgage is a pretty easy lender that way. And that really brings into this thing called blended rate, because just for easy math, we'll call your rate 8%.
Hmm.
But the beauty of the 50-40-10 is you're borrowing 50% of it at 8%, but the other 40 coming from
Right.
the seller in second
Right.
position. That could
Right.
be, I've seen as low as 0. I've seen 1 or 2%. I've seen 4%. And
Right.
this is why you have to create it as a win-win situation. You have to talk to the seller. Hey, I'm willing to give you a price, but I need it to cash flow. The only way we can cash flow is if you take 40% of this at some other rate.
Right.
So talk about the importance of blended interest rate. And the idea of doing the 50-40-10 is to get the blended interest rate below market. That's why this
Right.
program is powerful, right? If you
Right.
do the math on 8% at 50 and 40% at 2, you're
Right.
probably at 5-ish percent.
Right.
Talk about the blended rate.
Well, again, like you said, the idea is to be able to, you know, shift around the leverage position so that only 50% of your purchase price is at my rate, but at 40% carried by the seller is at the seller's rate. And typically that's even low below, market rates. So if you can kind of blend the two, it overall has an effect of, essentially having a, 5% rate or so, but getting 90% leverage. So, I mean, I've seen it again, like what you talked about, 0%. I mean, at least with our guidelines, you got to have like a 1%, kind of interest just to show on paper that there's, kind of skin in the game. But the reality is that after the loan closes, if you never make a payment with that seller ever, it's not really policed in a way. The impact from the seller's second, the financing that you negotiate, it has no impact on my first as well. So there's no way to disqualify you whatsoever. It's just whatever the terms are that makes sense. And obviously the pitch to the seller is that, hey, you're going to get a little bit of passive income on the second, but don't make it to where it's too high, to where it doesn't cash flow from day one. Now you in second position is in higher risk because you might not, every month you've got to come out of pocket to pay you. So just to understand the big picture on everybody's side, seller gets their price, gets to sell now, makes the bleeding stop. No more property taxes, no more homeowners insurance. Maybe there's a mortgage on there, no more mortgage payments, right? And then obviously on the buyer side, you get a property day one, 10% down, good cash flow. You're super motivated to buy and leave it at the seller's price. So it's kind of a win-win. You just have to kind of figure out the middle ground and what people are, comfortable with. Obviously, on the seller side, you really got to be looking for somebody motivated,
motivated with equity.
Motivated with equity. Right. That's the key factor. I feel the main questions, if you are able to get to the decision maker, once you kind of like maybe, spark the interest with the concept, is basically, do you need all the proceeds from the sale of your property, Mr. Seller Guy? No? Okay. Now, the next question would be, well, how much can you hold and for how long? And you figure out those terms and crunch the numbers. You come to me, hey, Steve, we got, this loan from the seller. What can we do in the first? We figure out that payment and then compare with monthly rents. It's just that simple. And so there's a couple people out there right now actively looking based upon that concept. We've had to have a lot more of a meaningful, conversation as far as a deeper dive. I haven't had a lot of time over the last couple of weeks, only because of just, a couple of things, funeral I had to go to, got sick, end of the month stuff. So it's been hard, but I love this, kind of like school format, because I'm able to kind of do the deeper dive with multiple people. Otherwise, no way I could do this like multiple times a day. It would just be like, all day long. So this has been good. But other than that, I mean, I'm seeing a lot more listings. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, with sellers saying, seller
it's coming,
seller sell, right?
It's
Seller
coming,
financing, and so, but sometimes their terms might be able to be negotiated even better in the case of, for you as a buyer, if you can then say, hey, instead of you carrying 100% at seller financing, what if you only had to carry 40?
Exactly. Yeah, this.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll get to that with Angela's questions in the comment, but we do have one brave person with their hand up, so we're going to go to JC and see what JC has to say. What do you got?
Hi, thanks for doing this. Yeah.
Hi, JC. Morning.
I had 3 questions actually. One is,
Awesome.
can this be used for an LLC? The second is, can this be used for multifamilies? And if so, what sizes? And the third is, what if magically the seller says, hey, I can carry 70%?
Yes.
What do we do then? So,
Man, wow.
Great. So let's do
you
this
work
quick.
for us? Yeah, JC, do you work for us? I swear.
So hold on, Stephen. So let's do it one at a time. So can this loan be in an LLC?
Yes, it can. We don't mind either or. We prefer it actually to some extent from an underwriting standpoint if it is under an LLC, because it only is, basically ensures that it truly is an investment property, right?
Right.
So, but either way, it doesn't matter. It
Number
does
two
matter in certain
was-
states. I should correct that. In certain states where New Jersey, New Mexico specifically, 6 units and under on anything residential, whether it be 1 to 6 unit, multifamily, or even mixed use, where you have a residential and commercial component. 6 units and under, you got to hold title under an entity. Otherwise, under an individual, the rate is 1% higher and there's no prepay.
So a couple of state differences, but generally speaking,
Right.
velocity mortgage is easy to deal with on LLCs.
Correct.
Next up,
Correct.
can you do this for multifamily? And if so, how big?
Yes. So great questions again. Yes, you can, not only for residential 4 units and under, non-owner occupied, but also 5 or more units, like an apartment building, mixed use, where you have a residential and commercial component to it, and then even straight commercial. But as it pertains to multifamily itself, no limitations on units, just limitations on loan amount. So at some point, it kind of caps itself on the number of units. Just depends on the area, but it's mainly based on loan amount.
We don't need to hide that. Loan amount caps right around 5 million, right? The loan
Right.
at 5 million?
Correct.
So again, you're theoretically talking about buying a $10 million apartment, 50%
Right.
loan, 5 million, right? So there's your cap.
Right.
JC, you can't go above $10 million. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Happy hunting, JC. You can buy anything 10 million.
Yeah, but what if I get 70% from the
No,
seller?
I was just going to lead to that. So the only stipulation as it pertains, depending upon property type, right, is on residential properties, the first mortgage needs to be at only 75,000. So seller can carry the rest. You put down 10. On commercial, the only stipulation is the first needs to be at 100,000. Seller can carry the rest. You come in with 10%, up to 90% combined loan to value in any combination.
So
That's
in theory,
amazing.
yeah. So
Right.
in theory, you could come in, JC. The velocity loan could be 20%. The seller could carry 70%,
Right.
and then you would have to come
You
in
come
with
in with
10% down. That's the magic of
Correct.
the 50-40-10.
And
Right.
is there any way of doing this for a vacation home?
Meaning like
Well, okay,
Airbnb.
Yeah,
Yes.
like if you wanted to have some place which you could utilize as well as rent out. So dual
So
purpose.
here, keep this in mind. So the intention of the property being an investment property is all we would need to kind of categorize it as. Beyond that, as far as your usage, that's going to be kind of up to you and doesn't need to be expressed initially, because technically, due to a particular law that's still in effect called DoddFrank, until that gets deregulated, my loans cannot be utilized on any primary residence or second home as it pertains to residential 4 units and under. So basically, if you're going to be in that property for more than 14 days a year, it's considered a second home.
Got
Yeah,
it.
so
Thank you so
there are
much.
rules. Yep.
Right.
Cool.
So we could just call it just an investment property. We do allow for short-term rentals like Airbnb and such like that. So we could categorize it in as such to be able to still get the financing.
Yeah, but let's not dance with mortgage fraud, right? If the purpose is a second home, he does
Well,
not
I'm
do
just trying to
second
let her
homes.
know that don't stay in the property for more than 14 days.
Yeah,
Then
14
it's
days
technically
is
not
the
mortgage fraud. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
yeah. So
I'm
again,
not dancing. Trust me.
no.
I
I'm
know I'm
just
not
putting this
doing-
on video. I'm putting this on video.
Okay.
All right, we'll go to Angela's question, and then we'll go to Jim next, who's got his hand up. Angela asks, I listened to Friday, or was it Thursday? It was we recorded Thursday. It came out Friday. Podcast
Right.
of you talking about the year of the investor what does being ready mean? So I see it as, and Stephen, I'll go to you after me, but being ready means a couple of things. First, there's the standard stuff that I'm sure Angela and everybody here knows. Get a buy box, be disciplined, learn average. You're not really even in the game until you know average. But the year of the investor means you have multiple options to buy deals, right? We're here on a call giving you what I believe will be the most Swiss Army knife loan product. What I hope this means for the year of the investor is when you see an opportunity, your brain goes, I can write this up 2 ways. In theory, you could write it up 3 ways, right? You could do a cash price, you could do a conventional price, and then you could do a 50-40-10. So when I talk about being ready, it's not only the stuff that we've been talking about 5 years, buy box, discipline, learn average. The year of the investor to me means we have to skill up and practice things that maybe weren't relevant, right? You would not get a 50-40-10 in most cases in 2022. It was just too hot. It was a seller's market, not a buyer's market. Well, great news. We are currently in a buyer's market with lowering demand, rising supply, more motivated sellers. So you as an investor, me as an investor, we have more tools at our disposal than we did in 22 or 21. So when I talk about being ready, it's that added thing. Because I believe most of you that if you get a deal of the decade, which again I think comes around at least once a year, it will be this ability to write multiple offers. And until you're comfortable with that, until you watch this, until you practice it, it will not be a tool that you can use, right? Because if you're not ready to have the conversation, you haven't practiced it, it'll be uncomfortable and that'll come through. So, because it's the year of the investor, we all, myself included, need to realize we have more tools at our disposal to take down deals. That's really what I mean this year versus past years, right? Past years, it was all about speed, speed, speed. Now we can get more creative. Steven, you want to add anything?
I would 100% agree with that. Leveling up and understanding what options and tools are available to you are only going to make you more effective out there in this particular market, because everybody's coming at them with vanilla, right? Fannie, Freddie, VA, but with the current rate environment, sometimes that doesn't make sense, or they got to come in with a lot more down, or they got to buy all cash. So unless somebody's kind of, making those type of offers, but they're typically not the best offer in the case of the, for the seller. Wouldn't you agree? For like all cash, they're usually like, really low offers, because they're like, hey, we see blood in the water. We're going to, kind of come at you all cash because I see the desperation. Well, I think this is also a good tool to kind of meet people halfway a little bit more so than having to come at them so, so low. So, I like the fact that just being ready, just understanding what tools are available, because again, if, like you said, expressing this particular idea, you don't have the confidence in knowing what you're talking about, it will come through, and that's only going to make the seller more nervous. Like, this guy doesn't even quite know or understand what he's talking about, and I'm going to say yes to him. I don't know. So
I'm potentially loading hundreds of thousands of dollars to this individual.
Right, I'm going to bet in this guy. And I'm in second position. He's not that confident. I'm not going to be that confident. So I think just understanding how to utilize this particular tool is only going to make them, a more effective negotiator.
Yeah, I agree. You got to practice, guys. That's part of being ready, Angela. All right, Jim, you got your hands up, bud.
Yeah. Going back to that commercial, is that a 20-year or is that a 5 or 10?
That's a 30-year. That's the difference here.
Fixed,
Jim.
Fixed.
30-year fixed, 30-year amortized. It does offer an option to be able to do up to, or I should say, interest-only payments for the first 10 years of your 30-year fixed loan. So it does give you a little bit more, kind of flexibility to stabilize the property once you kind of get in, rehab some units, increase rents, things of that nature, and then once it's really cash flowing, much better, you can go back to, fully amortized or something like that. So there's some flexibility with the product and stability as well because of the 30-year fixed rate option. Obviously, it's going to be priced accordingly due to, the ease of use, the 90% CLTV, things of that nature. But we just got to crunch the numbers to see what makes sense.
And so I can book a call with you and kind of go through those numbers to get an idea, so I can start working on a buy box.
Of course, Jim. Just not today.
No.
You get Sunday off. I'm only asking for a favor.
No, I'm trying not to type back, and it's just been an overwhelming great response, Mike. I mean, I'm getting like,
good.
There's at least 10 emails I got to reply to for just from our video from Thursday. So. Nice. It's been an overwhelming good response, and rightfully so, because again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing more listings saying sellers are willing to do seller financing.
No, I am 100% convinced that this loan product will dominate our RAT community once we get comfortable practicing it. Because again, in a world of less demand, more supply, more motivated sellers, the creative investor wins. Right? It's not cash all the time. So
I can see it even more in commercial. I think that's huge for commercial.
There will be somebody that takes down a 100-unit apartment building with this. There's no question.
Well, I'm looking at a 24, or it's actually a 12-unit. One other question too, though. This is they're 2-bedroom, 2 baths, but they're 900 square feet. Can you add a bedroom into something like that?
In a multifamily?
Yeah.
So I mean,
Not in
it
the
depends on
yeah.
it depends on the layout. So I think you're really talking about, 900 is pretty small. Like I bought plenty of 2 1s, 2 2s. Really, it'd be tough, right?
Okay.
1,000 square feet minimum is
Gotcha.
where sometimes you can find a third. It'd be very unlikely to have a 2 2 with a den that's kind of made for it. So
Okay.
I would tell you I doubt.
Gotcha. But
Yeah.
minimum 1,000 square feet.
That's where you start getting, oh, is there a third bedroom somewhere? Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
what I've seen. Of course. All right, we got a question from Kevin. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
No, I was gonna make a joke. It was gonna be racial. I should probably not say it.
Yeah, I probably should. We're recording this, man. What's up? Hey, Carlos, nice to see you, buddy. Kevin Q says, I have a potential deal using the 50-40-10, but the seller wants a much shorter timeline for the seller
Okay.
finance. I've pitched longer
Okay.
terms, 10 years with the balloon, but no go. Any ideas how to approach this? Strategy is the ADU play, looking to complete 12 to 18 months. So again, folks, the seller second, this is excellent question from Kevin. You're really negotiating kind of three things to me. One is the rate, obviously. Second, I actually start by calling it a payment, but you can use either one. And then to his point, it's the term, right? The term. I always start with 30 years to match up. I will go down to 10 years just to let everybody know the communication I have. But yeah, there are plenty of sellers that say, hey, hey, I'm 80 years old. I'm not going to live that long. I want 2 years or 3 years or shoot, 12 months. You just never know. What I do in those situations is just honest communication. My plan for this property is X. In this case, it's an ADU. It takes X amount of time to build an ADU. It will take me X amount of time to do the refi. One thing you might be able to do, let's just say, again, I don't have these details, but I've done this enough times. Let me guess that the seller says, hey, I'll do everything. I'll even give you your rate, but I need 2 years. And as the question kind of highlights, that's going to be really tight, right? And again, I don't like short timelines. What you could do is you could write a clause that says, we'll have a balloon at 2 years, and then there could be the right to buy 2 more years, right? If I'm not completed or the ADU is not occupied or whatever, I can get 2 more years and put a number on it. Say that extra 2 years cost me $5,000, $2,000, right? This is all negotiations between you and the seller. So if I was going to go ultra short term, which I consider anything less than 10 years short term, I would want to add a clause that buys me another duration, because you just never know what the rate environment will be. Your plans to build an ADU may say 18 months, but the city gets involved and pretty soon it's 28 months. So you want to do everything you can to remove the time pressure. And lastly, if the seller says 2 years, take it or leave it, then you just got to tell them you have to leave it. And then you come back in 45 days and try again. Because sometimes sellers get, stuck, and then 45 days from now, they're not as stuck because no other buyer showed up. So money with creative financing, which I consider this to be the number one tool, is made in the following. I'm telling you, I have not been able to do something like this with anything less than 5 meaningful conversations. It's not only the trust factor, it's the education factor, it's building a win-win. Just because I've done these and taken down portfolios like this doesn't mean it's any easier for me. It does take time. There's no question. Anything to add to that, Stephen?
No, 100%. I mean, you said everything. I don't want to, repeat what you were saying, but just a meaningful phone call. Just reach out via email and just go over the details with me. So then I think you get a better understanding of how to present these things. Is really all it is. Like you said, just takes practice. So I don't mind the phone calls. I don't mind the emails. So feel free to reach out.
You know what, Stephen? Do me a favor. Do me a favor. Type your email address. Actually, can I do that? Actually, I guess I can. I know your email. Go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, okay.
Just in case people here want to email you.
Right. No, outside of that, it's just basically understanding. I think the best thing to do is maybe come up with a mock scenarios, what as far as what your ideal pitch would be or offer would be, and then from there let's go over the hard numbers. Because again, I think when you talked about one call, one close, it makes it difficult if you don't have all the details right there. Oh, I got to call you back. Oh, you know what I mean? So sometimes that might be the case, but if you have some of that already backstory that about the property, that how motivated he is. You've done some research. It's been on the market for a while. He's had a couple price drops. You know, if he's had it for a while, he's probably got a good chunk of equity. You might be able to, approach him by having some of the, conversation up front and then knowing all the details, all the numbers. Like you can just speak, and then he'd be like, oh, wow. Instead of like, giving people time to think about it. Sometimes now there's like other people whispering in their ear, no, that doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? But like when you have all the hard numbers, right, it's so hard to like say no to something like that when it all makes sense, like, numbers wise and everything. So, okay. And then now they have all that information up front instead of, well, let me think about it. Come at me. I don't know. That's just for me. So, but coming up with like a maybe ideal scenario as a number they think, and then giving me a call, and then we can structure the, the financing numbers, and then they can come at them and say, hey, this could work if you're okay with this. So I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing I would tell folks, again, we are talking to our school community, is I'd love to see these 6 different accountability group calls that go on each and every week, kind of have these discussions, let people practice kind of digging in. I think that'd be good, just to keep everything going there. Got a question from Romel, probably more about best practices. I'd love to give your thoughts on this, Stephen. I've heard when people try to negotiate for seller credit, it would be wise to use it for closing costs instead of renovations or buying down the rate. What do you think is the best use of seller credits, Stephen? You have a thought on that?
Well, I mean, again, if the strategy is for temporary for the financing, then obviously you're not going to buy down the rate because you're not going to be in the loan long enough. But if it's going to be more long term and it's maybe set it and forget it, it might make more sense to buy down the rate at that time versus just I just case by case with every person. Yeah. But for me, for the long game, it would be, buying down the rate if that was an option. Otherwise, depending upon how much the closing costs were and how light you were for that particular project, then you might have to bite the bullet. You could always refinance later down the road, you know what I mean, for the time being. But if you needed that extra money to take down the project, then so be it. So I think, unfortunately, without knowing, a lot more of the other kind of factors, that's the only way to kind of answer it. It sounds like middle ground. I don't mean to be that way, but details matter.
I think again, I think it's basically how long do you plan to hold the property, right? If the plan is 5-10 years or more, buying down the rate really can be a savings. But if you're going to be in and out of that deal in 18 months, then it's a different answer. So again, reach out to Stephen. I put his email there if you want to have a specific conversation. I would go there. So we got a question from All Nighter Ryan. How do you calculate combined rate with different amortizations? Say a first is 30 years and a second is 20 years. So I believe he's talking about the blended interest rate.
Right. Again, I think you had mentioned that there was a calculator that you found online or something like that, Mike?
Yeah, there is.
Remember that? Okay. Yeah. So that's the only thing I would rely on.
Yeah.
Although I'm of Asian descent, it doesn't automatically. The first is at 7 and no, sorry.
Yeah, no, you could. I would research, and this is what I did when I found it, Ryan. Is type in blended interest rate, and that is, there's actually math formulas to do that. So that's how I found it. Do you loan on mobile home parks? Actually, I don't know that answer.
Yes, we do. We're just not that strong on them, to be honest. We're very conservative on value. It's basically 10,000 per pad. So there's always that large discrepancy between what buyer and seller agree on price and how we view the property. So in the 11 years I've been at the company, coming up in October, I've heard of only, I think, 7 we've ever done, maybe.
Yeah, it's just not your sweet spot. You are good at what you do.
Yeah, that's not our lane. Yeah.
Would it be possible to use this on a seller who did a reverse? I think he meant 1031 exchange. I don't know of a 1041. So I think that's.
Or does he mean reverse mortgage?
I don't know what a reverse 1031 exchange is. I guess I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I think what you're talking about is buying a property first and then selling one second. I guess that's what the reverse is called. It's all about the equity position. Right. You don't care if the purchasing property is a part of a 1031. That doesn't impact you. Yeah.
No, just as long as he's got enough equity to play with to where he can, leverage that in second position with our transaction. And so that's basically what it comes down to. So just math.
Yeah. Just math. Yep. Question from Ryan: what constitutes primary home versus an investment property? Seems like it could make my primary pay for itself somehow lawfully. So how do you, what's the general rule? Is it 14 days or less you live there?
Well, okay, so his primary residence, if he lives in it, we can't finance it if it's 4 units and under. So there's
Right.
no, because again, even if you want to claim it to be, I mean, okay, so in the one-off plausible, scenario to where, oh no, I'm moving out because I want to turn it into a rental, to where okay, you'd have to show the paper trail. Where are you moving to? Okay, I'm hoping that you're moving to a place that you're paying rent, because we need to kind of, solidify with the paper trail that you truly moved out. So typically speaking, in that, plausible scenario, you moved out, you're renting a new place. We want to see a copy of the new lease. We want to see, the canceled deposit check, canceled first month's rent check, copy the utility bill, your driver's license being changed, to update the address. All of that would have to kind of coincide with the normal process of you actually changing addresses, right? So in that case, then we could, and obviously we'd want to see you actively listing your property for rent and so on and so forth. So in that case, we could. Otherwise, you living in it and you're claiming, a couple of days I'm not there. Is that cool? No, that won't work.
That won't work. Well, let these people. Everybody's trying to get a little creative here. I do believe the answer to this is no.
On an apartment building, though.
Yeah, apartment's okay. Over 5 units.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Arnold Schwarzenegger apartment house. Yeah, you can do it in an apartment, but not a house. So the question here, we'll just put this one to bed. Let's pretend for a moment your primary residence, you transferred it to an LLC. You then rent from the LLC. Is that now called an investment property?
No, because you still physically live in the house, no matter what the, vesting kind of like, hocus pocus people are trying to do.
Mortgage fraud, folks. Mortgage fraud.
I'm renting for myself, but I'm not really. No, if you physically live in the house, you cannot do it that way.
Yeah, no, not going to work. Very creative though. But that's important.
I like what their mindset. See, this is kind of scratching on the surface of like understanding the dynamics of the framework of what we're talking about, and then pitching it in a way to where it fits certain scenarios. So I love it.
Yeah. So here's a question that you may have insight. Again, it's not velocity, but you may have insight. What are the commercial 30-year fixed rates on multifamily right now? And
for us, yes, not so much for other lenders.
Well, stop.
Sorry.
So hold on. So when I get this question, it's usually a deeper question. I want people to know that most commercial loans are not 30-year fixed.
Correct.
So for most lenders, the answer is not applicable. They don't play. They don't give 30-year loans. Most commercial loans are 3, 5, 7, or 10.
Right.
With that's the length of the loan. They might be amortized for they'll be amortized on something longer. This is what makes Velocity so powerful. This is why Velocity refied all of my commercial properties years ago, because they're all on 30-year fixed.
Don't tell them the rate, Mike. Don't tell them the rate.
No, we're not. We don't need to go there. Yeah. That's why I don't care. Yeah. Anyways, it's okay. But yeah, Velocity is very unique, where you could finance an apartment building, a mixed use, 30-year fixed. A traditional bank, Fannie Freddie, they're 10 years at best. So that's a very important caveat. Velocity is very unique in that way.
Right.
And now you're actually set 25-year AM 5/1. That's very common.
That's right. So that's typically the standard conventional commercial loan. So it's not quite like apples to apples comparison, but to give them an idea on what we talked about on the 50-40-10 with great credit, 9.25%, 30-year fixed, 30-year amortized. That's the start rate, but you can still buy down further. So again, going back to the request for the seller, credit towards non-recurring closing costs, you could utilize some of that as well to buy down the rate to somewhere in the 8s. I mean, technically, our floor rate is 7.615 on a 30-year fixed. So if you can get that on the multifamily right now, I think that would be
you're looking pretty good.
Yeah. Right. So again, there's ways to kind of structure the deal to where you could use some of that seller credit to buy down the rate, so that the property could cash flow with only putting that 10% down. So again, it's just understanding your options and then making an offer. And if they accept, then it's kind of a win-win. But what you were talking about with that, what's that again? Prop Radar? What was the company you said, Mike?
Property Radar.
Property Radar, yeah.
Next week. Yeah.
That's going to be, I think, a great tool.
Yeah. So we'll do one more question and then we'll go to you, Jim. One more question from JC really quick. Does the term of the seller financing make any difference to the 50-40-10?
Great question. Not so much in the case of you qualifying for my first mortgage. We normally, from an underwriting standpoint, we want to see the seller term to be around 3 years or longer, from the standpoint of like it being like, somewhat on paper legitimate.
Yeah.
Right. Not like a gift of equity kind of a thing. But in reality, after our loans close, let's say, right, at that point, if the seller never makes or I should say, if the buyer never makes a payment to the seller, or if the seller decides to forgive that second altogether, it's basically the same thing. It's like getting a gift of equity. So no, to answer your questions, not really. We on paper want to see 3 years or longer, but otherwise it doesn't impact your ability to get the financing on our first mortgage. It obviously will impact your overall cash flow, though.
Yep. Okay, Jim, your hands up, bud. Go ahead.
Kind of a spin-off of that other. My buy box is about an hour and a half away, and we're actually staying out there to do rehabs. So can I have a second home out there that would eventually be an investment property?
Well, okay, so right now, as it stands, as far as you as an investor, you currently own your primary residence, Jim?
Correct.
Okay, and do you currently own any other rental property right now?
Yes.
Yes, beautiful. Now, the new property you're looking to acquire, that's another residential 4 units and under, or what kind of property is
Yes.
that? Okay,
Correct.
Yeah, it would be basically Jim buying another investment property. End of story.
Use it for my own use.
Well, Jim is buying an investment property. End of story. As far as how he wants to utilize it after he buys it, I can't stop him. But the intention initially is an investment property because his track record shows that. So I don't think I would have to think anything differently.
Okay.
But yeah, an investment property.
Yeah, because what we're doing is all my crews are staying up there as we're doing the work during the week. Right now, we're just
again, yeah, you buy that property and then you can use it to kind of have your crew, stay out there. That's fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Again, just as long as you're not living in the property yourself personally, then you should be fine. When you
can you do it to where you're like 3 and 4, that type of thing? So, because I'm out of town, I'm up there 4 days a week. I'm at home 3 days a week. My wife's at the primary. So that's what
Okay, so
is there a way to turn it into almost like a vacation home, but not quite? It's more of a work home. No.
I mean, again, when you say work home, technically, if you stay in that property more than 14 days a year, it's a second home, and unfortunately, my product cannot be used on that type of situation. Yeah.
Okay, so that would have to be more of a conventional type loan.
Potentially, yeah. If you're looking to get the financing for investment,
it would roll into owner-occ. It would be an owner-occ loan.
Right.
Now, with owner-occ, does that all have to be conventional, or can you do a DSCR owner-occ? I'm self-employed. There's no way I'm getting a conventional loan.
No, you're not. You should just call me later, Jim. We'll talk about it more because you're talking about something that if we structure it the right way, it should be okay. But I think for your usage and your specific usage, no, you cannot financing it. You cannot finance using my product.
Okay. Because
of the fact that you're going to be utilizing it for personal use longer than 14 days.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very, very cool. We got a question from, I'm going to say, Omira. Hopefully that's close. No disrespect if I got it wrong. Can you use the 50-40-10 if you're a new investor buying out of state?
Wow, lots to unpack. The beginning part with the first-time investor, yes and no. Depends on the property. So if it's a single-tenant residential, like a condo, townhouse, single family, anything like that, you cannot be a first-time buyer, meaning you would have to at least own your primary residence. However, on a 2 to 4 unit or a commercial property, you can be a first-time buyer where you don't have to own your primary residence. Now, at the LTV of 50% LTV, that should be fine for first-time investor. But as far as first-time out-of-state investor, we do not allow.
Okay, there we go.
So yeah, you would have to already own a rental property out of state.
All right, we got. I'm going. Oh, Jim, is your hand up again, or is that from last time? Oh, no. Okay, it's gone. All right, folks, we have a couple more minutes. I'm scrolling through the list. If I missed your question, I apologize. You can put it in the comments below. I'm scrolling. Any other thoughts on this, Stephen, while I found our next question?
Not really. I mean, again, I think I know we talk about it, and it sounds like almost like a unicorn kind of a thing. But it's if you can understand just the concept of shift around the leverage. But I think once you get past that, it's just about making an effective pitch or offer. And only again, I think with that is through that property radar thing that you're talking about, knowing a little bit about the backstory. So you're coming at them with like something tangible or relevant, not just like, hey, I've got something that doesn't really fit your needs as well. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, hey, without even saying it, it's like, yeah. If you're looking and you're doing the research, I think that's really what it comes down to. The ready part is like, also looking at the right potential opportunities and not just like throwing darts at a dartboard. Like, you know what I mean? Like some of it, like you said, just maybe put a listing out on the market, had a VA loan on it or FHA, and you know what I mean, is trying to sell
equity,
right. So just looking at listings that have been on the market for a while, that would probably be a good start. And then from there, doing the research, like, hey, what's the backstory? How much equity you might have? How long you had the property? What kind of loan do you have? Is it maturing soon? Stuff like that. Even at some cases during the property radar, you might know that the property might be in foreclosure or he's like behind up payments or something.
Yeah.
Right. So now you kind of like, oh, I know he's a little bit more motivated, in addition to that. So other than that, a lot of phone calls initially, understanding all that, and then just, getting to the right decision maker. I think that's the other part of it too. Maybe talking through to their listing agent, you lose some of that impact or that effect, because then now they got to repeat it to their client. And I think sometimes a slight disconnect. So
lost in translation. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So Kenny's got a question. What is the minimum loan amount from Velocity can do on a refi and or a purchase?
So on residential, it's 75,000.
Loan amount.
Loan amount. On commercial, it's 100,000. So not to say that that's a hard flex, but we're one of the very few lenders that goes down that low.
Right.
On blanket loans, we'll actually accept the value to go down to 50,000 per property on a blanket loan. So that's also another kind of useful tool. So if you're, fishing in those areas that mainly Midwest, areas like that, price points are a little bit lower. That blanket loan product has been very, very helpful.
And again, blanket loans could be used for purchase or refis, correct?
Correct. So blanket or refis, that definitely works. So if you're an investor that has a bunch of properties that are, under 60,000 or 70,000, I can definitely help.
Yeah, that's something we don't talk about enough. There's a lot of folks who picked up a bunch of properties at 40, 35, whatever grand, and they're really tapped out. They can't get anything, but that's why a blanket loan makes sense. So
agreed. Just grouping a good, a bunch of those smaller ones together to make sense for us to do the loan as a lender. So
very cool. All right, Jim, I think you got your hand up again.
Yes. So rural area, are you at 70 or 75%?
So when it comes to rural areas, there's no really minimum or maximum LTV restriction in a sense. It usually comes down to population density that goes hand in hand with ensuring that we can find sales comps. So it's not so much the area, it's kind of like what kind of sales, are going on in the area. Because there's areas that are less populated in, below our normal kind of threshold as far as what we've seen statistically, where you have at least a city that has at least 25,000 or more in population, we're usually able to find sales comps. Anything below that, we've, found over doing loans over the last 2 decades. That's kind of the sweet spot. But there's, been areas where 16, 17,000, population, but it's just a hot area. It's up and coming, whatever the case may be. Just so long as we can find sales comps, we can do it. Now, there's been great areas to where there's areas where I've had no comps at all, but I was still able to get the deal done, but at a much more, at a 50% LTV is basically where the sweet spot is. Yeah. So at 50% LTV, I've been able to get the underwriter to get a little bit comfortable with, hey, the loan amount's not that high, really strong borrower, you know what I mean? Something like that. With compensating factors, borrower's got a ton of money in the bank. If anything should happen, I think we feel pretty comfortable with his track record.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Very cool. Frank, I think we got time for one more question. I got to get to my 9 o'clock interview. What do you got?
Thank you. I think it'll be quick. You were talking about blanket or portfolio loans. I was wondering what the minimum loan amount would be across a small portfolio?
Sure, sure. It's again on residential properties mainly. So any combination of 1 to 4 unit non-owner residential, where each property is valued at only 50,000 or more. So if you have two properties valued at 50,000 each, the combined value is 100,000. My max loan to value is 75%. So 75% of 100,000 is 75,000, which meets my minimum loan requirement of 75,000. Now, on a side note, if everything, happens to where we've done the appraisal, we've gotten to the end of the finish line, and the appraisal comes back a little bit less than what we maybe initially estimated, and the combined amount, even at the max LTV, is below 75,000, we'll still do the loan as an exception if the buyer really still wants it, or the borrower, just because, again, at that point, we'd rather get a little bit of something than a whole lot of nothing, but we're not trying to actively promote that we'll finance basically an amount that's equal to financing a used Honda Accord, but we'll do them.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you both for doing this.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. So, folks, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Again, I love doing these. You're going to get to talk to me each and every Sunday, 8 a.m., unless I'm traveling. I will bring in guests from time to time. Stephen Dow, thank you for doing this. This is Sunday. This is your day off. We appreciate you. Folks, please understand that the year of the investor means it is on all of us to get a little bit more creative, understand things like the 50-40-10, and we will bring up Property Radar, the CEO, next week, because I think if we take the notion of buy box, which gives us on market, and then we tailor that and look at off market, and then realize we have a whole wave of NODs and FHA, we have a whole bunch of other pain points coming potentially with the recession. I think there's ways lots of us could do a couple of mailers each and every week for our buy box. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that next week with the CEO. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
See you guys. Have a good weekend. Bye. Later.